Hey there guys, how's it going? I thought today I would talk about my drums. I get asked about these all the time. My go-to drums are by Naughty Seal Audio and they're called Perfect Drums. These came out about 3 years ago, I think, and they're my favorite for any sort of modern sounding production. I love them. I use other things like Ugratone and Panda sound kits, but my first choice are these Perfect Drums. So I'll just dive into what the kit actually is. This is the interface. You got your drum window where you choose your kit. There's a bunch of presets as well. The sampler window where you can actually add third-party samples into it, like one-shots. And then a mixer window, which is self-explanatory. So I'll quickly go into what drums I'm using. I use the Pearl Reference Maple on the kick, the Sonar Artist Series Bronze for the snare. And then the cymbals change from time to time. This is what I'm using currently across the whole kit. Don't really use the splashes. So I love the kit, but last year I started to feel like I wanted a different sound, especially for my snare and my kick drum. So I'm blending in some samples. I've got a one-shot sample from Panda Sound. It's called the Roots Kick. It's from one of their sample packs, one of their one-shot packs. It sounds great. And I blend that in with the kick drum here. And you can see the actual Perfect Drums kick drum is very, very quiet. But it gives a bit of weight to the overall snappiness and the deepness of this kick. So this one, blended with this one, sounds pretty huge to me. And then on the snare, it's a 3 Sigma instrument sample, so it's round robined and it's multi-velocity layered. So unlike the kick drum sample, which is just a one shot, one velocity, one volume the whole time, which is fine for kick drum. For metal kick drum, I can get away with that. But for the snare, I need the dynamics and I need it to be round robin to get a sort of realism. And when these two snares are blended together, you actually get quite a big snare that sounds like the Black Album snare. You know, that's what I think anyway. And then the processing on the drums, I don't split them up into individual tracks and mix like most people do. I just find this stereo track sounds great. There's a mixer in here for the levels. You've got an amazing overhead control. The room sound is fantastic. EQ, this EQ is going across the whole kit. I've got a low shelf just to keep the whole kit nice and tight. Got a dip at 160. There's a bit of a build-up around there. I wanted to just notch it ever so slightly. And then a big cutout of 400, which is a problem area for drums across the whole drum kit, really, to be honest. And then a dip around 10K, just where everything was sounding a little bit spiky. And then compression, I just used the NY Drum Bus compression preset on Recomp. Works great. I've tweaked it a little bit. The threshold's at minus 17.4 at the moment. And this just gives me a little bit of gain reduction between sort of 1 and 3 dB, just to give the kit a little bit more punch. As you can hear, without the EQ and the compression, it sounds fine, but it is a little bit woofy, and I want to get some tightness out of the kit and a bit more of an attacky sound and take the woofiness out. So with the EQ on, you know, a lot more attack there, brighter, snappier, cuts through the mix better. And with the compression on, it just gives me that punch. Right now, I'll just show you a mix with the drums in context. This is the reamp demo. This is from a few months ago. People ask me a lot about what I do with my drums. How do I program them? Do I use grooves? That sort of thing. I've never used a MIDI groove. I've never imported any MIDI libraries, any MIDI groove packs or anything like that, ever. I just build them from scratch and then mess around with them to fit the song. I'll just dive into what I do and my mindset towards certain things. Here's the first riff here is very simple. And I really wanted it to groove and have huge impact. So I just simply went with a caveman beat. I call this a caveman beat. It's a halftime caveman beat. And what I've got going on, I've got my right crash going. And on the intro, there's a little hit from the left crash. And it's just kick, snare, but underneath the snares, I've got the kick drums as well, so it gives a huge, big, fat sound when it lands on the upbeat. If I was to get rid of these kick drums, still sounds good, but if you have the kick drums in there, full velocity on the kick and snare, they hit harder. And on a caveman beat like this, it really works. So for the first two, you got the caveman beat. And then I'm going into this still halftime groove, but I'm switching to the ride cymbal, and I've got a bunch of double kick going. Just to change things up. And at the end of sections, I like to do a fill. It's nice to just accent the riff, some fills. For instance, you've got this da-da-na, da-da-na. So if I just loop this bit. I've got the da-da-na, da-da at the end, so I want to accent those. And I'm accenting it here with 3 snare hits and then 2 snare hits with the floor tom as well, which just gives it this big impact before I go into the next section. You know, after this sort of busy kick drum bit, it's on to another riff, and I've just gone straight back to the caveman beat, just to give it that simple impact heaviness. Another thing I do a lot is this, I don't know what they're called, to be honest, I'm not a drummer, but it's like a sort of a trill on guitars where you sort of scrape up to a note, and I'm doing it, and with this bit here, I'm scraping up to the snare drum. So it gives the snare drum extra impact, I feel. So we listen to it in context. Just gives that snare hit here that extra impact. If I get rid of these, sounds fine, you know. It's just the same beat. You know, that would sound fine, but fine's not good enough, is it really? I want it to be heavy. I want it to be explosive. So you know, it sounds like artillery or something. I don't know. But let's mess around with the beat. I've got I've got this this kind of caveman sludgy heavy riff. And this caveman beat's just hitting on the 1, 2, 3, 4. But I could easily just accent the whole riff with some kick drums. And I'll just delve into the MIDI right now and try that. You know, I could easily do something like this, and it still sounds, you know, just as heavy. And on, you know, some riffs, I do that. I just have the kick drum following exactly where the palm mutes are on the guitar, or exactly where the hits are on the guitar. I just have the kick and the snare following those completely. you know, and then maybe a fill at the end. I mean, you'll hear me do fills like this all the time on my songs. You know, a simple da-da-da-da. You know, something like that. Maybe not on this riff, it doesn't really work, so I'd probably just do something like this. Yeah, it seems to work. You can play around with this stuff for ages. So that's kind of a halftime groove, like 1, 2, 3, 4. I'm at 210 BPM. But you can do, you know, a full-time groove, which doesn't really groove as much. If I just do a simple, you know, I'll use the word caveman again, a sort of caveman pattern. You know, a bit more punky. But actually, when you do these full-time grooves, and then you go into a half-time groove, like I'm doing here, so if you start with the full-time groove, and then you're transitioning into a half-time groove, it gives the half-time groove more impact, and I don't know, it makes my head nod, makes me bang my head. There's no right or wrong way of doing any of this. This is just what I do and what people ask me about. And the most important thing I haven't actually talked about yet is humanization on drums like this. You'll see they're all different colors. If I just highlight them all. And I touch the velocities. You'll see they're all different velocities. You know, we've got some stuff at 125, 127. When I come in on a beat, I like the kick drum to be as hard as possible, the crashes to be as hard as possible. And then, you know, during the bar, you know, just change the velocities a bit, you know, bring them down so it just sounds a bit more natural. In Reaper, to humanize your drums, which is a really important thing, you press H and it comes up. So you got all notes or selected notes. I'll just do it on all notes. And you've got timing and velocity. Sometimes I'll have this on like 5, but on the tighter metal stuff, the more produced stuff, I just keep it on 3. And I do this across all my Midi. So the timing, it just shifts the timing by 3%, just to make it slightly more human and to give it more sort of feel. And the velocity, it varies by about 5%. I could probably crank this up to about 10, and it would still sound pretty natural. But if you want your drums to sound just a little bit more natural, do stuff like this. Definitely mess with the timing, put it up to 3%, 5%, whatever works. You can't really notice it as much in metal because metal's just been very produced, very tight for a long time now. But in other genres, you definitely will recognize it. You know, there's no easy way to do this. The best way to do it is to just click it all in. That's shit. This is what I do. I'll just sit here and just click until I get it right. You know, that sounds all right. You know, it sounds okay. It's totally passable. Because Perfect Drums is just a really good piece of software, and you can pretty much have everything at full velocity all the time, robotically snap to the grid, and it'll sound passable, it'll sound fine. But if you really want, you know, to make things more realistic and go from this, just knock your timing up out by 5%, knock your velocity out by about 5%. It'll give you a bit of variety. And then if you want to take things even further, which I highly suggest you do, is to alter the velocities by hand and think like a drummer. So on like a snare fill and a tom run, the velocities will shift from hand to hand. So the second one I usually do lower than the first. Yeah, it takes time. Yeah, it can be a pain in the arse if you haven't got the patience for this kind of thing, but it just sounds better. So I suggest doing it, guys. So what I've done, I've humanized by 5% on the timing and the velocity. I've left these quite high. You know, you can get away with that for this, but for fills and the kick drum, I've left at 100%. But, you know, because you can get away with the kick drum being 100% most of the time. And I'm using a one-shot sample, so if I take this down too far, the kick drum will actually disappear. The sampled kick drum, the roots kick, will actually disappear. As you can hear, I bring it back. See, I can't take it too low. And now it's back. So here's the fill, humanized. Still sounds a little bit robotic, but do something maybe a bit more realistic. That's a little bit more realistic. I knew a drummer that could do fills like that. Just hear it in context. Yeah, it's okay. Does the job. Don't know if I do a fill like that on that part, really. That sounds a bit better. Yeah, now I've found a fill that actually sounds all right, and I would probably use in the song. So I hope that helps, guys. I know Perfect Drums 2 is coming out soon. I'm thinking about buying it. It depends what the feature set is. I've also looked at Drumforge Bergstrand. That looks really good. I'm thinking of switching to that because the amount of options you have is crazy. The amount of tweakability you have inside the plugin is crazy compared to Perfect Drums. So I'm thinking on it. This can apply to whatever drum software you guys are using. You know, Ugratone, Easy Drummer. Make sure your drums sit in the mix well. They're punchy. Even stuff, you know, even if you're doing thrash, like you think of Master of Puppets, those drums are super punchy. They're in your face. The mix just comes out and grabs you. Just make sure you make shit heavy and exciting. So I hope that all helps, guys. Cheers. Alright guys, since you're still here, I just want to plug some of my stuff. I've got a bunch of music over on Bandcamp, and it's all pure metal fury! Stream it all for free, and buy some of it if you want it. Links below. Thanks for watching, guys. I really appreciate it, and subscribe if you want to see more metal-related stuff. I'll be back sometime with a video on something else, so until then, ciao.